We're here with this grand sir on another edition of Overall Overtime with one of the best journalists in all of media in general, the great sir that is Jim Trotter, and a big Jill Scott connoisseur that he is.
That's
Give that round of applause indeed, because he's got taste like that all the way, man.
that's my favorite Jill song, so no question.
No doubt about this,
You
sir.
did it
But
right.
of course, man, because you selected that one of your many songs, and I highly recommend you see the two other prominent songs that he picked in the great past talk that I had with him on Overall Overtime before. But not only with Jill getting that playlist live, it is something that of another noble, wonderful woman artist. Oh, yes, and we're gonna run this town all the way. Getting that whole title, Ariana's boo with that one and having his daughter. Convince him to put that in the bio. I gotta ask you, man, in terms of that 24-hour period, when your daughter convinced you and floated the idea to have Rihanna's boo in your bio, was it a level of saying no at first to your daughter to do that, or are you like, you know what? Let me give me 30 minutes to ponder. I'll do and have that in the bio.
No, fathers never say no to their baby girls, so no hesitation. The other thing, we just been having fun with it, so it was just another layer of the fun. So no, I didn't hesitate at all. I did it immediately.
Well, no doubt about it, sir. And that whole moment, obviously, getting the love that it got. So, round of applause for this man. Getting this whole moment, in that, and how fun that whole moment was. But, good sir, it's just something where, at the very least, us talking about not only throughout that Super Bowl, but in the aftermath of everything that's happened, and how, despite the levity that, I started off with opening, of course, it's still with the backdrop, with everything that happened, obviously, with Eric Bieniemy, as you mentioned already in a few shows, as you eloquently said on NFL Now today about this, and really gave the shout out that you gave to Sherman Lewis again, and highlighting how ridiculous it is the fact that he never got the job, how he has not wanted to probably talk about the pain that he's experienced from not getting that job. In the broader perspective, and why I had to have this hashtag of racists not believing that blacks can coach offense, because
Hmm.
it's something where we see with Byron Leftwich not having a whole job despite his exploits of the past few seasons, and how he somehow wasn't even in demand or talked about of being another OC anywhere. We see what happened with David Shaw, as prominent he was at Stanford, and how that offense was always NFL ready and producing prospects towards the league, including Tanner McKee has won this year, and yet you didn't see his name knocked on for people to have him as an OC. It speaks again to the broader perspective that we see, despite Thomas Brown getting that head coaching job, excuse me, that offensive coordinator job with Frank Wright, and how that was positive. And we'll see what happens with Drew Terrell going from the Commanders to maybe the Cardinals. But the broader point of how a lot of these people out here, that whether the owners, whether in general media circles that we deal with, that are not black, they don't believe blacks can call offense and have this whole racist viewpoint. Just your whole thoughts on that right there.
No, it's just so frustrating and exhausting having to keep repeating yourself and to simply ask that you be judged on, your abilities as opposed to anything else. But then when I get tired, I have to remind myself I can't be any more tired than the men who are actually going through this. So I try and stay on point with it and keep shining a light on it, because it is ridiculous. When I think of Eric Bieniemy, if a white offensive coordinator, or if a white man had been offensive coordinator for 5 years and gone to five straight AFC championship games, to three Super Bowls, had won two Super Bowls, had a league MVP twice and a Super Bowl MVP twice at the quarterback position, owners would have been tripping over themselves to
Mhm.
hire that person to run their teams. Well, with Eric Bieniemy, he can't get a head coaching job. And so, look, going to Washington may ultimately be good for him in the standpoint of professional growth, in that he can put together his own offensive staff. He has total autonomy over the play calling and whatnot. But for him to have to go through that when others have not had to go through it, it just shows that there's a double standard there. And that's why it lights a little fire under me because it's just not right. And I understand life isn't fair, but these men have earned an opportunity, as I say, not just to succeed, but to fail. So let them succeed or fail on their own merits, and then we go from there.
And it's just the level of whether the intentional gaslighting or, trying to play willfully ignorant or the thing that annoys me the most is when, a lot of colleagues who aren't black, know that the clear injustice and the clear BS of this all. And they try to say, well, him going to the commanders or he feels happy to do this, hopefully that means that he has a quid pro quo with Ron Rivera at the very least, who, mind you, we're dealing with a dysfunctional Commanders franchise where we don't know who the owner is going to be. We don't know what the situation is, even if it is still Daniel Snyder. You're going to trust anything Daniel Snyder says for any merit. It's something where I just hate the level of trying to dance around and not calling it for what it is because we see not only with Matt Nagy and Doug Peterson, but going all the way back to Brad Childress. If you're under Andy Reid, let alone all the other examples and seeing quarterback coaches like Zach Taylor, who wasn't even an OC, let alone an OC call plays, get a job. That's the thing that annoys me more on that is, do you feel that there's still that level of media colleagues, whether white or non-black, who aren't just saying this is some clear evidence of obvious racism and having what we thought this league was going to be about in terms of having end racism in the back of the end zone, all this, just more performative nonsense.
Yeah, to me, that's what it is. It's performative. And look, I think there are people, black and non-black, who recognize that race is an issue in this, but the problem becomes, what can you do? Because the only people who can change this are the people who own those franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to answer to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the issue here. The league can have all the programs it wants, it can have all the rules it wants and the protocols, but it doesn't matter because there are no consequences for these owners. They don't based on a meritocracy. And I can tell you this, there are owners who have had point blank, you are not going to tell me who to hire to coach my team.
Mm-hmm.
And they can get away with it because they're right. We can't tell them who to hire. So I think what you see in part is people keep saying, or I don't want to say they keep saying, but I think there is this feeling of how many times can I say it? How many times do I have to say it? We keep saying it and it's not making a difference. So it's almost like you become numb to it and you just kind of accept it as that's the way business operates in the NFL.
Have you heard from any players since it's gone down outside of maybe those in the Chiefs that obviously will ride, for Eric Bieniemy, but just players around the league and seeing, this level of once again lack of belief of black offensive minds and thinking that last coach offense at a way equal higher towards any white counterparts. Have you heard it from any players around the league that says it's another hiring cycle where we're continuing this and how we kind of need to be vocal about how this is a glaring issue that persists?
Yeah, you hear about it, but what I always say when I hear people say, "Well, when are the players going to get involved?" The players can't even take care of their own shop. Like
Yeah.
they've been complaining about not having guaranteed contracts forever, but they won't stand up for each other and with each other to demand that they have guaranteed contracts in the labor agreement. So I'm not expecting them to stand up and be as one to say that we need more black head coaches, that we need a more level playing field. And that's just the truth, man. So I know for a fact that the Players Coalition reached out to some players, or reached out to coaches, I should say, a year or two ago about this issue and said, we'll join forces with you. And the coaches weren't down for that because there was a fear of retribution. That if they did stand out front and say, this is some racist stuff going on here, that they would never have an opportunity to get a head coaching job. So I always say this, and it's easy for me to say this because it doesn't directly impact me, But I say, you go back to the civil rights movement, and the one thing we know is that there is no progress without sacrifice. And so at some point, if it's that bad and black coaches get that fed up with it, they're going to have to ask themselves, what are we willing to sacrifice? And only they can determine what that answer is.
And we see Brian Flores still continuing that in terms of his lawsuit and having Steve Wilkes added towards it, and still at least him being an defensive coordinator, with the Vikings now for his next move. But as we see, it's just even harder for offensive black coaches to get these opportunities in general, and how Thomas Brown becoming Frank Wright's second straight offensive black coordinator, is something that is like a quite notable thing to give Frank Wright credit on after everything that happened with Marcus Brady last year. But it's not only in the NFL, but you see the likes of Josh Gaddis, who goes from being an in-demand offensive black coordinator from his time in Michigan, then he goes to Miami, and then he can't get a job out of anywhere. Only Mike Locksley and Dino Babers, I can recall being now this black offensive coaches in the college level, and Kevin Sumlin, we don't even hear about Kevin Sumlin anymore.
Right,
You know,
right.
it's bonkers. Just your thoughts in terms of not only NFL level, but seeing, just in general, beyond just the college level, just that mentality that's long been persisting. And shout out to Pep Hamilton, by the way, who can't even get himself any traction now. Well, you see Shane Stricken getting this whole head coaching job with the Colts, when Pep Hamilton was probably arguably more critical to Justin Herbert's development with Anthony Lynn as much as Shane Stricken was.
Yeah, it's you brought up the guy earlier who's a classic example to me, and that's Byron Leftwich. People want to say that Tom Brady made him. That was all Tom Brady. They tend to forget that Byron was the OC the year before with Jameis Winston, when Jameis threw for over 5,000 yards and 33 touchdowns. Now, he
Mm-hmm.
also happened to throw 30 interceptions, but was that Byron's fault or was that Jameis's fault? So, and now, as you say, he's unemployed. A year ago, he was considered the leading candidate to get the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching job. But because he didn't want to work with that general manager who was in place, he didn't get it. And again, now he's like out there. So it's funny, to see how, and when I say funny, I don't mean literally funny. It's interesting to see how all of this works, and that's why when we say, like, to black coaches, be careful what job you take, and they will say to you, well, if one is offered, we have to take it because we may not get another opportunity. And they're right, which means a lot of times they're taking over the most dysfunctional situations that there are. And that's a travesty. So, man, I don't have the answer for this. All I know is that there have only, in the history of the NFL, there's only been two ways where we have ever seen substantive change as it relates to, excuse me, race or how an owner runs his team. One is through the threat of litigation, as we saw back in the early 2000s when Johnny Cochran, the late Johnny Cochran, and Cyrus Mehri threatened to sue the NFL over discriminatory hiring practices. And after that, we saw the implementation of the Rooney Rule, and then we saw the number of black head coaches increase. And the other way is through the threat of excuse me, the threat of sponsors pulling out, as we saw with the Washington Commanders a year ago, when FedEx and these other companies were saying, we are not going to be a part of this. And all of a sudden, the owner, who had declared multiple times over many years, I will never change the name of the team, all of a sudden says, yeah, we'll change the name of the team, and we'll hire a black club president, and we'll hire a Latino coach. Those are the only two ways that I know of where I've seen real change or substantive change in the NFL.
And it's something where I really do hope media colleagues that aren't black, don't get mad when we say in terms of segments about it's kind of ridiculous in a 70% or more black league that you don't believe that this is level of black quality coaches, particularly on the offensive side towards this, and you continue that level of this thought process, like seeing certain colleagues trying to, and to me, I think, filter this in a very insidious way. Well, they'll try to say, oh, this is an offensive league. It's time just to hire the offensive coaches. This league is passing Bill Belichick by. All this. I'm not going to mention names I heard say that specifically, but to me, I feel that that's a little bit of another coded thing of them trying to be comfortable and not acknowledge the genius of black coaches on both sides of the ball, but especially knowing that there isn't many of us being given the fair opportunity on the offensive side as they want to just give on the defensive side.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking this morning at the Arizona situation. They've got a general manager who has no general manager experience. They've got a head coach who has no head coach experience. They have an offensive coordinator who has no offensive coordinator
Right.
experience. And they have a defensive coordinator who has no defensive coordinator experience. And yet I'm just trying to think to myself, what franchise would ever allow a black person to get away with any of that? Where the GM, the head coach, the offensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator are all white men. If they were all black men, man, this league would go nuts. It would probably shut down
My Lord.
to see something like that. So, but then that's part of the problem too, to be honest with you, Andrew, because
Hmm.
when we do get in position to hire, we don't hire our own a lot of times.
Yes.
And that frustrates the hell out of me when we sit here and complain and we complain and we complain about not getting opportunities, and then we have an opportunity to make change. Like Tony Dungy, he was very intentional about saying what he wanted on his staff and
Hmm.
that he was going to have black men in prominent positions on his staff. And even when he decided to leave the Colts, he left earlier than he had planned. Why? Because when he was going to turn it over to Jim Caldwell, as he has told me, he wanted to make sure that Jim had a championship caliber club so that he could succeed as well.
Hmm.
So, black coaches are afraid that, they don't want people, because I can tell you this, in Miami when Chris Greer became GM, and if you'll remember, he brought in Reggie McKenzie and
Hmm.
he brought in Jim Caldwell, and he had one or two other blacks in some important positions. And there was literally someone who said to him, you know, "What are you doing? Kind of what message are you trying to send here? Basically, are you trying to make it all black?" And his response was, "I'm just trying to hire good people.
Hmm.
Period."
Hmm.
So when we do it, we get looked at with a side eye or the skepticism. But when white folks do it, it's, oh, they're just hiring the best candidates. And that's where my issue is. It's like y'all can't even be honest about it,
Hmm.
right? Just tell us you don't want us or you don't think we can do the job, because of the melanin in our skin.
It's so inherent with that, and it's something. And how I appreciate the late Dennis Green so much, especially given Sherm, the opportunity that he should have gotten from his Packers time, and at least getting the Vikings like OC for that short period with just that, and hoping that Sherm, wherever he's at, is at least still comforted by the fact that his impact and you and others shouting that out towards him. And you mentioned that, like, when we see this with Todd Bowles and letting Byron Leftwich go when it should have been a full level defense, it's not something where we're saying all black coaches got to hire black with that, but they you're not seeing that at other standpoints outside of, again, giving Frank Wright his due for just that. But when you see that, and you don't see Mike Tomlin hire black offensive coach and at least filter that around, but at least he gave Brian Flores that love back. But just seeing that level of not hiring the own to like continue that level of those stereotypes like continuing.
Yeah, it's frustrating, man. I don't have much else I can add to it. It's frustrating, it's exhausting, but you got to keep fighting.
What's one thing that's not frustrating, man, is that when you're on Brother for Another with the great Michael's there, and when you talk about non-NFL stuff, because people have to understand this man is more than just the NFL. So I want to ask you real quick, man, about this past NBA All-Star weekend, the most melanin that Utah has ever gotten in your whole mind with just that. Just your own thoughts about not only this whole past weekend, but who do you have right now in the NBA Finals in your mind, JC?
Oh, in the East, I'm gonna go Milwaukee.
Okay, Milwaukee. Whoa, over the Celtics. That's real.
Yeah, I'm going Milwaukee. I think Jay Crowder is gonna be a really nice addition for them. And in the West, that one's so hard because number one, who's gonna be healthy
Mm-hmm.
is a big question. And I'm actually, when I leave here with you, I'm on my way to the trophy shop to pick up my latest jersey. It's an autographed Steph Curry jersey, which goes up behind me. And
Oh,
I'm a Bay Area guy, so I grew up with the Warriors. So I'm just gonna fall back on it and say I'm gonna go with my Warriors to go back in the West. So it'll be Golden State and Milwaukee.
this man getting his Charles Barkley. Yeah, give him a Charles Barkley guarantee right there for right there.
I wish I could guarantee it. I can't do it, man, because I don't. In my heart, I don't believe it, but my emotions and my allegiance, I'm saying Golden State and Milwaukee. Do I believe it? Not necessarily, but that's how I'm riding.
Would you, if you really had the choice to desire to go and you wasn't coming off the back of Super Bowl coverage, would you have gone to a Salt Lake City All-Star game?
No, I wouldn't have gone to any All-Star game. So I've done it before, and I've actually covered an NBA Finals in Utah. So I have spent time there
Mhm.
from an NBA standpoint. Look, I've heard everybody bagging on it and whatnot, but I'm less concerned about where it is than what it is. And I just found the whole weekend, unfortunately, to be really disappointing. And we celebrate the for one of the few times in recent memory the slam dunk contest only because there was a white man who won it, and really an undersized white man. And I think that's why everybody is making such a big deal out of it. If Mac had been black, would we still be talking the way we're talking? So it's sad that that's the only major talking point coming out of the game, other than just how bad the game itself was.
You know what's so funny about that as we close on this time with you, Jim, on this one is that, you know, the reason why I appreciate Mac is because he was like, I trust Patrick Ewing to be my head coach, at Georgetown with that. And how I had to give him love with that, had to give him love with just that, and just at least because of him with Zion, at least in the IG era for their high school careers, at least like you knew if you saw the IG with them dunking with just that. But it's something where I'm just glad that he wasn't ever mentioned in a Jack Harlow song. Like it would be one thing. That would annoy me right there. Would I be like, all right, that's a little bit too much here in terms of that. But at the very least, he at least didn't have that level where it would have been obsessive overhype towards it. But it is something that it is quite ironic for a Utah All-Star game that, that tended to happen in that way. But it was something where at least like, seeing him have his exploits, before in high school, it didn't annoy me. In fact, it made me revel in the memes where I had to say Jordan, Carter, McClung, forever in Duck Galore history in those days with that.
He deserved it.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to think that I'm dumping on him, because I'm not. He deserved it. He was phenomenal. He brought a little bit of creativity that we hadn't seen. I saw some things in terms of, the dunk that I hadn't seen anyone do before. So um in no way am I meaning to denigrate his performance. He was outstanding, man.
No doubt he was with that, and way more outstanding than that game or the celebrity contest, that was before. Where we need Rock and Jock back, man. We need Queen Latifah still in that ball from Sean Kemp type moments.
Right. They just need guys to play competitively. That's all they need. And when you're just, you know, um passing everyone off, matador defense, it's like there's nothing compelling there, you
Nope,
know?
nope.
The most compelling part of the game, truthfully, I thought, was when Jason Tatum
And
and Brown matched up on each other, you know?
hmm hmm
That to me was interesting because they were playing, neither one wanted to give anything.
They were, and that's how they are in practice there. For me, the only thing that was going to be compelling to watch was the draft, obviously, and how that was going to go. And even with them mentioning the reserves first, they wanted to avoid just that level of ridiculous people online making memes trying to get at someone that is an all-star player and wanted to avoid that. But, one final note on that, I don't know if you saw any portions of that, but did you see how Charles Barkley was having his conversation in that whole level with LeBron and Giannis drafting, and Shaq was getting on him there in a bit. And by the way, happy birthday to the great Sir Charles Barkley, turning 60 today. Do you believe that Charles was a little tipsy in that Utah level there?
I never saw it. I didn't turn it on until the game started, and I missed the first 5 or 10 minutes as well. So I didn't see any of that. But would it surprise me if he were tipsy? Not in the least.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he basically had this moment, and this would be the closing moment on this where, and I got it here in terms of the screen share because it is something quite funny to see.
Chuckster, what's been your favorite part of All-Star Weekend so far?
The people of Utah have rolled out the red carpet. And I got a chance to see the great John Stockton and Karl Malone.
Appreciate that.
Shut up, Charles.
Hey, Chuck.
Yes, sir.
What did you think of LeBron's selections among the reserves?
Man, ain't no bad picks today. All these guys are great. Well, doesn't sound like you're drunk. You all right? No, man, it's my money. No, it ain't the money, it's you. The money. Hey, Mark, kills me. You down there. You all right? Yes. Hey, what the hell are you drinking? No, man, it's my mic. I got a delay.
Yes, you always blame it on the equipment, Chuck.
I want to thank Patron for sponsoring Chuck.
That after seeing that moment there, JC.
In that little clip, I didn't see anything that would say it to me. I mean, if I had seen more, maybe I would say yes. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if Charles was tipsy at all. That's who Charles is. Charles gonna have a good time. So, but no, and watching that clip, I didn't discern that he was tipsy, but he
Yeah,
may have been.
I thought he had, as he was mentioning, the microphone issues, and it was just something where they had. It was kind of weird. Where I honestly thought some people were trying to sabotage Chuck Kenny and Charles on it because they had the mic on when they were doing the draft, and you were hearing their comments, and it was going on for like 4 or 5 minutes, and it was something where, for Turner, any level of TV, but for Turner or ESPN, you would think that what is going on here with the microphone and what's going on and how is this allowed? So it was just kind of weird. And thankfully for them, they didn't say anything that could have been in a level that could have gotten them in any real trouble or whatnot. But yeah, I think it was them having regular mic issues, and that was the whole case. But it still was a whole funny moment, with just that. Just a great moment just to be able to talk with you about non-NFL stuff too. The great stuff. That is Trotter. Get him out of here with this Teddy theme, because he's going to go get that Steph Curry jersey to add to the back there. We will be out of here. Catch this man, of course, not only NFL Now, NFL Network, but it's also Brother for Another and many other endeavors. A great Sunday to JC. We're out for overall overtime. Catch you for the next one, y'all. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.